It's impossible to weep for them. I mean, they are, when it comes down to it, influencers, the most hated people in Britain.
Influencers.
Well, there we go. You said you didn't have a view, Giles, and then you definitely did find a view.
Do we need to have a different sense of where we are in the world these days? Edwina Currie, you've been a politician, you've been interested in politics for many decades, sprightly though you no doubt are. Are things bad when it comes to where our position in the world, our ability to defend ourselves militarily, where we actually fit in the world order?
Dig, I'll just ignore the ageism there. You know, if you're lucky, you'll get there one of these days.
No, that's hopeful.
And you might just have the wisdom that goes with it. Over the weekend, I had a little bit of sympathy for Starmer, just a kind of bat squeak of sympathy, because there is an argument that says that you don't want to join in offensive operations, but you have no choice about joining in defensive operations. But that's a kind of sophistry which easily leads to the accusation that's been levelled at him personally by Trump of cowardice. And I think that's an accusation that should stick. I take on board that, you know, our aspirations for the armed forces may not be what we can manage to do. But actually, I think we're looking at that in the wrong way. And a really competent leader. As an aside, I've been watching the Channel 4 documentary on Blair. And my God, what a contrast, you know, the total messianic belief that he could get things done when nobody else could. And here we have Starmer saying, no, what does the law say? Oh, my God, the difference in style and culture is enormous. But I think we're probably trying to fight in the wrong sort of way. The United Kingdom makes a lot of drones that go to Ukraine. We actually are part of that fight. It's drones that will be determining what happens in the future, not ships, which I think are extremely vulnerable, perhaps not even bases. And we're in a position to actually help in a very practical way. We haven't heard anything about that at all. There's also the question of whether ends justify means. And I suspect that Trump is finding himself in a bit of a pickle here. And I can well understand Starmer and our own senior defence people scratching their heads about it a bit. Because if the ends justify the means, then almost any ends are justifiable. But if you don't achieve the means, you're then left with a god-awful mess. And what Trump was expecting was that, you know, once he'd bombed to smithereens the leaders of Iran, that some opposition would take over, some much more malleable group of people would take over, you know, like they did in Venezuela, or appear to have done. And it hasn't happened. And now we seem to be in a full-scale war. So that's the mess that you get when the means are not delivered and the ends actually themselves become the problem. And I'm worried about it. Fortunately, I drive past petrol stations, but most people don't. So I'm really worried about the effect. It also means, of course, that Rachel Reeves' spring statement was rubbish almost the moment it was delivered, and perhaps should not have been delivered at all.
Yeah, it's an interesting point whether she could have just paused that. Giles, I'm trying to work out how you're going to feel about this. That when you hear Trump go Starmer, it ain't no Winston Churchill, and it's all very sort of the bully boy approach of Trump. Do you have a frisson where you think you want to stick up for our country, for our prime minister? Do you think it's just Trump being Trump? I don't care. Does national pride sort of figure in any of your consideration when you look at this stuff?
Good question. Yes, I suppose a bit. When Trump says he ain't no Churchill, what's weird is he's saying he's not a Churchill because he's not bending to my will. Yeah. Really, I mean, you could look at it in different ways what he meant, but really, I don't know what Trump thinks Churchill did. I doubt he's much of a historian of the Second World War, but he will have the general picture we have of Churchill where no one else would stand up to the Nazis. Churchill would. And one of the reasons we think about Churchill in those ways is because Churchill's self-publicity was fantastic. He was a great wartime leader, but he was a great self-promoter, much like Trump. And so Trump has fully swallowed that Churchill thing. But really, the more you would say that if you think that he stood up to Hitler, Churchill, the big dictator. If you don't think much of Trump, if you think the world order's greatest threat is Donald Trump at the moment, and I'm not saying I do, but if you think that Trump is the big threat, well, then standing up to him would make you more like Churchill, I think. He's just trying to. That's a sort of big dick in the playground, willy waving sort of nonsense about we're not dealing with Churchill. The idea that Churchill would have given time to Trump, I don't, is preposterous. I don't feel my national pride particularly vested in Starmer, because we have it's a democracy, and you elect your dictatorship every 4 years, and nothing of mine in it there. Interesting the parallel in terms of our status in the world and Starmer, that Edwina talks about. Watching the Blair documentary, I must say I haven't, but and probably won't. But I suspect that she's saying, Blair, he really knew what he was convinced he could make things happen. Brackets, a bit like Trump. He was convinced he could make things happen, and I remember fondly the very active, engaged, and apparently result-driven politics we had, 30 years ago. But I think the point is Starmer fears ending up like Blair. Blair was a Prime Minister, and Blair is remembered only for going into Bush's pocket in defiance of international law and decapitating a regime which led to 20 years of death. Starmer, I think, probably think, oh my God, I don't want to end up like Blair. I haven't even sort of got rid of Clause 4 or whatever. I've done nothing, and now I'm in danger of just going into a war like Blair. So I think it's a fear of being like him that's driving this caution.
That's a really interesting point, actually, Giles. And I think the ghost of Iraq has been sort of looming over a lot of our conversations. Just finally on this point, Edwina, does it matter that it takes 8 days to send a destroyer to the... You think drones matter, but, drones and bases you often need bases and ships from which to launch things. It clearly would make a difference having something in the area. Is it a scandal? Andrew Neil called it a national scandal that we have no ships in the Mediterranean or the Gulf. It's going to take 8 days to lumber one across there. Is that a national scandal in your view?
Well, it isn't quite the British Navy that we were all brought up to believe in from the days of fighting Napoleon or, being master of the seas and all that kind of stuff. Ships are expensive and ships are vulnerable. The Iranian Navy went to the bottom of the sea within hours. So ships can be a bit of a liability as well as an asset. I've got friends who are living in Cyprus, and I've checked up with them. And the best defences are the ones actually, I think, on the ground, rather than ones that you're really so obviously vulnerable as ships. Plus, some of the other ships, like I think one of the aircraft carriers, is out on the main runs of Arctic or Antarctic,
the high north,
that actually matter, and we've got to be aware of. We've got to beware of leaving other more important areas or other important areas, like protecting ourselves from the Russians, for example, in a more vulnerable situation. It's a mess. It's a mess, and it needs a far better brain, a far bigger brain than Starmer and John Healey and the other people to sort out. Plus, there's no money. There's absolutely no money. I heard one of the defence ministers yesterday on the radio talking about how we were going to fulfil our obligation to NATO to get up to 2.6% of GDP. And then he said 27, 28. And then he says, and we've done it. And I'm saying, no, you haven't. You've just made yet another speech about it. You have not actually done it yet. You are not actually spending the money yet. How on earth do you think you're actually going to make any progress if all you ever do is blow hot air? You cannot fight a war with hot air.
Edwina, can I ask you though, because often this conversation focuses around the current government in office, and just to inject, I suppose, a bit of pushback that you'd probably get from the Labour government. They've only been in power for a short time compared to the Conservatives who went before, and a lot of defence procurement takes many, many years to get right. Is this a systemic problem? Is there something bigger going on here when it comes to thinking about who we are as a country, what we actually need? Do we need a fully functioning Navy? Do we need to focus more on drones? And why we don't seem to have been able to make those to make those calculations, where America, for example, is currently using, already embedded in its military, which is operating in Iran, AI to help it target much better. It's now apparently got its team down from 200 to 20 people doing this targeting work through the use of AI, and we just don't really seem to be able to do that kind of thing.
We are very stuck in old arguments, I think. There was a substantial peace dividend from the fall of the Berlin Wall. And we seem then to have switched to thinking about cybersecurity, quite rightly, to thinking of almost anything that didn't involve huge expenditures on men and machines. That's fine. That's also important stuff. We spent the money on, well, welfare and the NHS mainly, another 100 billion on the NHS in 17 years, which hasn't produced any improvement in life expectancy, says one of the health ministers. So we've spent it, and you can't unspend it. Hardware is expensive. It takes time to do. We are building a lot of stuff. We are building submarines in Barrow-in-Furness. We're building destroyers. We are building a lot of planes and helicopters, but a lot of it's being done for other countries like Norway and Turkey and the AUKUS, Australia and America, new treaties. We're not actually putting the money into it ourselves. So there's an element, Kate, of sleight of hand going on there, that, we've got a thriving 35 billion defence industry, but guess what? We are not spending that kind of money on our defence industry. We are kind of fiddling around playing cards, and it's not a great look. But getting back from that in any speedy way is, I would think, is actually impossible. We haven't got the money. We haven't got the guts. We haven't got the determination. We feel we haven't got the need. We think that Trump will actually do it, and Trump and the Israelis probably will do it.
It's the difference between talking about things and doing things, the gap between those two things we often talk about on this programme. Before we leave this, Giles, I've got a feeling you're going to know quite a lot of what I might call Dubai types somewhere in your life. People who go there a lot on holiday, maybe people who think that the grass is greener, as it were, over there. There's a certain cynicism about what's happening in Dubai, which I'm party to, but maybe I shouldn't be, and maybe you can correct me, or maybe you can join in, that these people who leave this country, they go to a place where there's no tax, but it's a very dangerous place and they're Brits. How far should we be concerned about their safety? What have you made of the tone around Dubai and Dubai influences in the last 2 days?
I wish I could generate an adverse, a controversial opinion. No, Esther and I are looking into moving to Dubai. The values that I really want my children to grow up with there is living in your Speedos and posting your breakfast on Instagram while slave labourers manicure your plastic garden. I mean, it's my brother-in-law, Alexander Armstrong, the Pointless presenter, and a lovely chap. I did take Kitty for a mini break in Dubai, and I said to Xander, because I air miles and stuff, and I was write a piece for Esquire. And I said to Xander, and Xander goes, so we went to Dubai. It's perfectly all right. You get the sense that when you wriggle your toes down into the sand, you're going to hit roll plugs after an inch and a half. Quite right. It's just a sort of bin with houses on it. So the problem with saying I don't care about them is that an opinion like that, particularly from me with my not very controlled way of expressing myself, can date poorly. If I say this and this afternoon they nuke it or something and English people die, I don't want to have said they deserve it beforehand. And of course they don't. But it's not like the people who the sort of doughty British souls back when we thought the empire was a good thing, who found themselves trapped in places like Singapore when World War II broke out and ended up in Changi prison, and it was a terrible, we needed to defend because they were British. These people, it's mostly, I'm a big football fan, or Queen's Park Rangers fan, and most ex-footballers live there. It's mostly my Instagram feed is full of footballers there with their wives all dressed up like in that particular way that we all know that happens in Dubai, and they're all moaning about it now. They're all moaning about it. I went to live here, and this is, and the whole point. The people who own Dubai, the Gulf, the sheikhs, their money's all in London. Because in London, it's very expensive. There's high taxation, which means that we're well defended. We have a great police force. We have a health service. It's a safe place to be. That's where the money. In Dubai, the UAE, it's the Wild West. And if you go there, you take your chances. The reason everything's so cheap, the reason you can afford that car and that house and those reams of servants is because there's no taxation, there's no defense. You're completely alone, and you're not even paying the people. So it's impossible to weep for them. I mean, they are, when it comes down to it, influencers, the most hated people in Britain.
Influencers.
Well, there we go. You said you didn't have a view, Giles, and then you definitely did find a view. Should we talk about chicken? Because, Giles, I'm going to start with you. I know we came off the back of your Dubai views, but you've been writing about the demise of better chicken commitments this week. What's going on here? Should we be worried?
Well, it shouldn't be worried, not as worried. That's exactly the same question that tends to be asked after we talk about Iran.
We can be worried about both things at once.
Yeah, you can. Yeah, but I mean, do you know what? If we're not going to, our lives, however bad it gets in Iran, they're never going to end up like the lives of these chickens. And this is not some wussy point where I'm just sort of rich and posh and care about food, and my life is just a sort of hobby, and I just go and rear my own chickens and give them a prep school education. Ha ha ha. It's about. I've spent 25 years writing restaurant reviews for the Times and persuading restaurants and persuading people that it's important that the welfare of chickens, like a sort of posh but less rich Jamie Oliver, that the welfare of the animals you eat is as important for them as it is for us, that we could eat a bit less meat, it could be better. And these messages have gradually got across. And it's in reasonably upscale restaurants, their welfare is good. They're not all organic. They're not sort of wild. They're not having an amazing time, but it's better than it could be. And the better chicken commitment was something which the lower grade of chicken outlets had all signed up to. And it really, it just said they can get a window. They don't get to go outside, these chickens. They get a window. They get room to turn around. They can't break into a trot, but they can move so they don't rot in their own feces, which can happen in the worst of factory cases. And most of all, they can grow for a certain amount of time. So there's a kind of chicken, there's one which is called there's a cob, there's the Ross 308. They grow from an egg to full maturity in 35 days, right?
No
so
way.
They go from an egg into enough chicken to fill a KFC bargain bucket of 20 pieces in less time than the Football World Cup is going to take in the summer, right? And as a result of that, because their body, their breasts, which is to say their front, grows so fast that their organs and their limbs can't keep up. So they're prone to cardiovascular disease and all sorts of organ failures. And they're not delicious. And so places like KFC and Wingstop and Bella Italia and Burger King and Popeyes and McDonald's and everywhere had signed up to being part of this one where we're going to have slightly better conditions, and we're not going to have those very fast breeds. We're going to let them have 6 weeks to 2 months to grow so they can be a bit healthier. That was great. We got there. And then they started pulling out. I mentioned McDonald's because it hasn't pulled out. I heard it being advertised in the break, and I thought, good old McDonald's, thank God for us. The ones who are advertising with the Times, they're still in the better chicken commitment. Those chicken McNuggets, it's not Joel Robuchon, but it's an okay chicken. These other ones have pulled out. They've gone backwards, and I think that is so awful. And it just needs to be promoted. People need to know that if you go to Wingstop or KFC or Nando's or Popeyes, which is where most kids, I mean, you and I probably don't eat there, but anyone between, you look at when it's school closing time, all the kids, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, that's what they eat.
My kids love Nando's. I mean, Nando's is like the one place you can take all of your kids.
And we all think that Nando's, because you can sit down and they don't always have shooting drive-bys at them, we think that Nando's is the acceptable face of London chicken eating. But they've reneged on this thing. And the Nando's guy in particular, the speciousness of his response when he was questioned about this, and it was repeated in the Times on Saturday or Friday or Saturday, pulling out, he said, it's harder for us to make our carbon commitments. He tried to make it an eco thing. It's harder to make our carbon commitments because these longer growing breeds, right, they cost more to feed and more to heat and more energy. Why? Because they're alive longer. He wants to have the faster growing, disgusting chickens that you kill even younger because they have less of a carbon footprint. Well, I tell you who else has less of a carbon footprint the less time they live? Us, people. The worst thing that you could do for the environment is to be alive. The idea that Nando's is saving the planet by killing chickens after a month is just hideous. And I just want people to not go and eat that stuff until they go back on this commitment.
I'm really surprised, Giles, that they actually have gone back on a commitment that was so publicly made. And I'm glad that you are highlighting it, because it is absolutely disgusting if you think about that. From an egg to a fully mature bird in 35 days is absolutely gross. Edwina, do you ever frequent any of these places? Would you boycott them, knowing what we know now?
Well, let me just say, well done, Giles, and hopefully it might actually have some effect. I thought your piece there was quite brilliant, and your energetic delivery of it even more brilliant, so well done. One of the joys of living in a small town of fewer than 6,000 people is that there are none of these within a short drive, but I am within walking distance of proper restaurants run by proper people who actually care about what they're doing and care about the taste of what they put on the table. We've got a new one up here now, Giles, called Bridge 42 in Whaley Bridge. You're very welcome to come and try that one.
Another date.
I'm on my way.
All your restaurant crits that I read in the Saturday Times, they're all about horribly expensive places in the centre of London. No, thank you. I'd much rather eat up here and be pretty sure that I can taste and as you taste what I'm eating. And as you say, that the outcome is healthy, not just for the bird on the plate, but the bird sitting at the table. You've got to think about the outcome of eating all that fried food as well. Not good for you. Absolutely not good for you. So I'm with you on that. Absolutely.
Before we go, Edwina, you're allowed to have an opinion on men in suits. Do you think men are more attractive in suits? Would you like to see the return of the suit? I'm speaking to you very much not in a suit.
You are, definitely. And part of me says absolutely. I looked at the piece online for the Times on this. You've got a lovely photo of Brian Ferry slouching in a suit. But the date is 1975, which is the date when my tailor dad actually passed away.
Oh, bless him.
I have a feeling he ain't coming back. And most of the other photos are of smart jackets with jeans, which he would have, well, he'd have had another heart attack. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. I think we might have lost Edwina there, but is she there?
Are you still there, Edwina?
I'm still here.
God bless your heart.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Edwina was making an emphatic point. Edwina was ending on her father would have been furious at a man in jeans. Oh, that was
let's leave it there. I've ruined it slightly, but I'm going to retreat quickly and say, bless your heart, Edwina, and Giles, you're too scruffy. You don't wear suits. I know that already. But
Giles, lots and lots of our listeners agree with you. I'm really saying they couldn't agree with you more. In fact, Andrew says, I had a KFC the other day for the first time in years. It was absolutely tasteless and dry and nothing like it used to be. So there's a lot of support for that campaign on chicken.
I might try and not take my kids to Nando's as a result of it, because the problem is it's the only place that all three of them eat the same thing.
You could go to McDonald's instead. I know you like McDonald's now.
Yeah, good point, Giles. We'll follow that.
There are other chicken places, and you can look them up, and you can get your kids into it. There'll be near you some place that does peri peri chicken or fried chicken, which will be signed up to this fairly straightforward agreement.
Well, let's all try and do that. Let's not go to places that don't do this until they get their fingers out and change it. I think that's an excellent point here. Caroline says, I'm an oldie here. Nothing more attractive than a well-groomed man in a tailored dark suit which shows off broad shoulders and maybe even conceals a bit of a dad bod, combined with the smell of a freshly laundered white or light blue shirt paid with a sober silk tie. Fwah! I think we might need to lie down after that message.
Yeah, I think we should. Giles, Edwina, thanks very much. Great to have you with us.